channel.
Ouch, that audio is horrible. I apologize. So let's switch to this voiceover. I went to this lovely park near my house several times over the last few weeks trying to photograph flying foxes or large fruit bats here in Okinawa. And unfortunately I went to this high viewpoint which has got a really great view, but with my cheap microphone on my shirt there, it didn't cut out the sound of the wind, so the sound of the wind overpowers my voice. So unfortunately I've got to do a voiceover. Anyway, so yeah, I went to this place maybe 3 or 4 times and used both my OM1 with the 300mm f4 and my Nikon Z8 with the 500mm F5.6 PF lens. Now basically the lighting conditions were late afternoon sun, and because I'm kind of high up and the sun was low behind me, the area that I was photographing got into shade quite quickly, and then it got into pretty low light. So I'm basically photographing sort of in dusk conditions, so the light is not great. When I got there with my OM1 I'd be about f4 2000 of a second, and with my Nikon I'd be about f5.6, again about 2000 a second, maybe 1600 per second. And I think when I would start taking the pictures, the ISO would be about 1000, and very quickly it would go up to about 5000 or even higher. So we are talking about high ISO photography here in low light. Now in terms of the autofocus, both systems did really well. I didn't notice any notable difference between the Nikon and the OM1 in terms of picking the birds up and staying on track in terms of focus. Now with the Nikon I'm using a 500mm PF, which is an adapted lens. It's not a native Z lens, so possibly with a native Z lens it might be a little bit quicker, I don't know, but I didn't notice any sluggishness really in terms of autofocus. I did really enjoy the 50 frames per second I was getting from the OM1 when it's only 20 frames per second from the Nikon. Now with bats, they have a very weird kind of flight pattern. It's different from birds. They suddenly appear out of some trees, flap frantically, turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right, and then suddenly disappear again when they see a tree with fruit that they want to eat. So it's not like with birds where you see the bird coming, you can take your time, get the bird in the viewfinder, track it until it gets close, and then hit the shutter button. This is definitely a very much see it, take shot kind of scenario. And sometimes they might stay out in the open for a few seconds, sometimes it's only half a second. So you basically take what you can get. Now, sometimes you're waiting for 20-30 minutes before you see a bat. Suddenly 1, maybe 2 might come out, and they'll be out for 30 seconds and they're gone. If you're not paying attention, which happened to me a couple of times while I was recording that video, is I would be talking to the camera, I'd see the bat in my periphery vision, pick up my camera, and the bat would already have gone into some tree somewhere. So you've really got to be on it. But these are really large mammals. In fact, they're probably one of the biggest mammals that we have here in Okinawa. I would say they're probably equivalent size to a medium to large raptor, so maybe something like an osprey, maybe a little bit smaller than an osprey, but still they're relatively large. And I've always seen these birds for years, and you usually see them as I'm driving home, as the light's gone, and I'll see them just fly across the road. And I have actually taken photos of them before. I've taken photos actually from my house. They sometimes hang on the telephone wires near my house, but I've never really thought about doing Ryukyu flying fox in flight. If you saw one of my videos about 3 videos back, I actually photographed a flying fox that appeared while I was photographing swallows, and it got me thinking maybe I should take some flight shots of flying fox. And a friend on YouTube, a very kind lady, suggested that she had seen lots of flying foxes at Zakimi Castle, which is this site near my house. Now I've been to this place a million times. It's really good at different times of the year for different species, and I have seen flying foxes there, but I've never thought about actually trying to focus on taking pictures of them in flight. So that's what I was doing over the last couple of weeks, and it was really enjoyable. So here we are back at the computer, and I'm now looking at some of the pictures I took with the OM1 with the 300mm f4. So when the bat was in the sun, the ISO was pretty reasonable. So yeah, f4 1600th of a second, ISO 800. Here it's flown from being in the sun to the shaded area, and what have we got with the ISO? It's already up to ISO 5000. That's not very sharp. That's not too bad. It's not too bad. So that's pretty good. It's relatively sharp. Of course there's noise, but not as much as you might think. I mean, there is noise, but that could definitely clean up pretty well with DxO or using denoise in Adobe RAW. Still lots of detail, and again, that's ISO 5000, those same settings. Now here's a few shots a few minutes later, and I really like this one here, where you can see the head between the wings, and already we're up to ISO 6400, same settings. Again, if you zoom in to the RAW file, of course there is noise, but it's not that bad. And I think of like my old DSLRs from 5, 6, 7 years ago, ISO 6400 I think would be worse than this. So for a small sensor camera, that is pretty good. And again, that will clean up absolutely fine in DxO or one of the other AI noise reduction softwares. That one's a bit further down the sequence, and again, the ISO has changed. It's now up to ISO 8000. So it's the same sequence from an ISO can change quite substantially just from the background. If it goes in front of some light colored trees, it might be ISO 5000. If it goes in front of some darker trees, it might be ISO 6400 or even ISO 8000. I wanted to get some shots of the bat in the sky, but I changed from ISO auto to ISO 100 because I wanted a silhouette, because I thought it would look kind of cool, almost like Batman. So here it is coming quite close over the top of me, and as you can see, some of the silhouettes are kind of cool, almost Batman-esque. So here's one of the shots I took with the OM1, and as you can see here, it's ISO 12800, 2000 f4. I could have dropped the shutter speed, but I didn't. And as you can see, there is definitely lots of noise, but it has retained some detail. And if I use the denoise in Adobe Camera Raw, that has cleaned up that noise really nicely, very quickly, super nice. There is still some detail in there. That's 12800 ISO of a bat in flight on the OM1. Yes, it's a horrible background. That's not necessarily because of the sensor, it's because it was quite close to the background. But if you zoomed in on that, that'd probably make an okay photo. So just briefly, we will look at some of the Nikon Z8 and the 500 PF files. So here's a bat that flew by quite close, and I think this is ISO 2000, F5.6, 2000th of a second. And yeah, you can't really see any noise at ISO 2000 on the Nikon Z8. So there is definitely a difference in the noise. You can't really see any noise there. That would clean up quite nicely. Here's a shot where it flew into a shaded area, and it's ISO 6400, and it is cleaner than the OM1. You can see that there's more detail in the feet there and the stabby things there. But it's not a huge difference, but there is a difference. As the light got too dark to try a high shutter speed, I tried some sort of RT slow shutter speed panning shots. Most of them are right off, but there's a couple I quite like. I quite like that. You've got the bat, you've got the stabby things, you've got the motion. I kind of like that. Just a bit of fun. This was quite a nice sequence when the bat came relatively close to me. It was very dark at this stage, but some of those are quite nice. Now there is a common issue that I've noticed with the autofocus of both the Nikon Z8 and the OM1, and I also noticed it when I used to use a Canon DSLR years ago. But if you look at this clip here with the OM1, the bat is nicely in focus, and then suddenly for no reason it goes onto the foreground and then goes back onto the bat, stays on the bat, then loses it again. And this often happens on long sequences with both setups. The camera will latch on to the bird, or the bat in this case, follow it, and then there'll be 8 perfectly sharp shots, and then for no particular reason a couple of frames will be completely out of focus, and then it'll be back in focus again. I don't know why this happens. It happens on both setups. Here you've got the Nikon, the bat is flying across the frame, and then suddenly the background changes and the bat is completely out of focus, gets back into focus a bit, stays in focus, and then I think on that sequence it stays in focus. Here's another one. This is with the Nikon. There's 2 bats in the distance. Again, some in focus. Here it's completely out of focus. Then it comes back into focus later. And again, loses it completely for no reason. My technique's pretty good with animals in flight, and this happens a lot with both setups. I've done a lot of research online and read about different makers and different setups, and I think this is an issue with all cameras. It can't always maintain focus for every sequence. Anyway, if you're still here, thank you so much for watching the whole video. I really appreciate it. I hope you found something useful in the video. If you did, please give me a like and a subscribe and say hi in the comments. I've only edited a couple of pictures, so I'll just put those up now. And hopefully I can see you on the next video. Take care. Bye.